Trump's Attorney General will be on the hot seat on Capitol Hill tomorrow.
He will appear before the same Senate panel that heard testimony from fired FBI Director James Comey. And Sessions says he wants to directly answer lingering questions raised by Comey's revelations.
KCAL 9 political reporter Bryan has a preview of some of the questions likely to be raised by lawmakers tomorrow.
And there are a lot of them, you can be sure. This is the second big hearing now in less than a week. Even as tomorrow's hearing will likely get top billing this week, the Trump administration was under fire today from nearly every direction, it seemed. 2 state attorneys general accusing the president of violating the Constitution. The travel ban was slammed by another court, and a California congressman is starting to rev up the impeachment train. But first, the big hearing on Tuesday starring Jeff Sessions.
It's an honor to be able to serve you in that regard.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions thanking President Trump at a cabinet meeting on the eve of what could be one of the most important hearings in the Russia elections case, as Sessions testifies in open session before the Senate Intelligence Committee on Tuesday.
Raise your hand, please.
Sessions is expected to face a long list of questions related to the Russia investigations and his contacts with the Russian ambassador to the U.S.
What were his contacts, if any, with Russian officials during the period of the campaign? I think that's certainly a question that we need to ask. Secondly, a question I'm interested in is what role did he play, if any, again, in the Comey firing?
I did not have communications with the Russians, and I'm unable to comment on it.
That was Senator Jeff Sessions during a hearing in January. Later, it was discovered he had conversations with Russian officials on at least 2 occasions. And then last week, former FBI Director James Comey reportedly told a closed-door Senate committee hearing that Sessions may have had a 3rd undisclosed meeting with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak in April 2016.
We also were aware of facts that I can't discuss in an open setting that would make his continued engagement in a Russia-related investigation problematic.
And there's the question about Sessions' alleged unresponsiveness when Comey told him he felt uncomfortable being called for private meetings by the president. And there may be more questions about why Sessions left Comey alone in the president's office in February when Comey says the president pushed him to let go of the former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn Russian investigation. Donald Trump Jr. verified that conversation in a backhanded way when he was asked by Fox News.
When he tells you to do something,
yes,
guess what? There's no ambiguity in it. There's no, hey, I'm hoping. You and I are friends. Hey, I hope this happens, but you got to do your job. That's what he told Comey.
The Sessions hearing isn't the only trouble brewing for the Trump administration. On Monday, the attorneys general of Maryland and Washington, D.C. accused President Trump of violating anti-corruption clauses in the Constitution and breaking his promise to separate his private business from his public duties as president.
Never in the history of this country have we had a president with these kinds of extensive business entanglements.
Following the inauguration, President Trump retained ownership of the Trump Organization through a trust managed by his sons, who say they keep the president updated on company profits. The law forbids, and the lawsuit charges, the president's position has enabled him to benefit personally from company payments. One example cited in the lawsuit is the president's company reportedly still receives lease payments from a Chinese bank. The Trump Organization says it will donate those profits from foreign entities to the U.S. Treasury.
Why is that not good enough? And do you have any evidence so far that there has actually been an influence on policy?
The point is that the appearance and the fact of his taking payments from foreign countries violates the Constitution.
The suit was filed by 2 Democratic attorney generals. The lawyers driving the suit are an advocacy group with partisan ties.
The White House says this is nothing more than dirty politics.
I think we'll continue to move to dismiss this case in the normal course of business.
And there's more. Now Sherman Oaks Congressman Brad Sherman says he's seen enough. He told me tonight from his office in Washington that he's now circulating an impeachment article on Capitol Hill after hearing the testimony last week from the former FBI Director James Comey. Sherman says it was the strongest signal yet that the president is obstructing the Russia investigation. Jeff, back to you.
Well, Dave, for the man who coined the phrase "you're fired," is the president tonight contemplating another termination?
Well, there's some talk about that, and here's what we have so far. The talk is the president may be considering firing the special counsel, Robert Mueller, who's now in charge of the Russia investigation. Christopher Ruddy, a conservative Trump supporter and friend, told the PBS NewsHour tonight that he thinks the president is considering terminating the special counsel, weighing that option. That comes after another Trump supporter, Newt Gingrich, tweeted that any Republicans are delusional if they think the special counsel is going to be fair in his investigation. Time to rethink, Gingrich tweeted. Could be a trial balloon, but not sure it's going to get a great reception on Capitol Hill or throughout the country after representatives of both parties heartily endorse Mr. Mueller. Jeff, back to you.
Okay, Dave, thank you.
Yeah.
And of course, you can watch Jeff Sessions' testimony live on our sister station, CBS 2. It's expected to start 11:30 a.m. tomorrow. Also stream it live on kcal9.com.